The Crimson Bridge catastrophe. Scandal alert. The Manhattan dream wedding implodes into a Wall Street nightmare before the adrenaline hits. If you love stories with earth-shattering twists and epic corporate vengeance, please like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Your support makes it possible for us to deliver intense dramas like this. The curtain dropped on the masquerade. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria in New York City fell into a chilling, deathly silence. One moment, flutes of chilled champagne were clinking, celebrating the union of a multi-billion-dollar property heir and a quiet girl from a forgotten upstate town. The next, the sound of a dry, brutal slap echoed off the marble walls. The groom's hand, red and stinging on his bride's cheek, was raised not in a toast, but in an act of violence before 1,000 guests, the entire elite of the financial capital. A matrimonial fairy tale had just shattered, but the real explosion was still to come when the bride's father, a quiet, unassuming man, slowly stood up and began to take off his face, the mark of humiliation. Clara Vance felt the sting before she heard the gasp ripple through the opulent room. The force of the blow snapped her head sideways, causing her pearl and diamond drop earring, a gift from her new mother-in-law, to roll across the polished floor. For a frozen second, the world was a muffled buzz, a kaleidoscope of blurred faces staring in disbelief. Then the burning, throbbing pain spread across her cheek, a crimson mark of utter humiliation. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, stood before her, his handsome face contorted into a mask of pure fury. His eyes, the same ones that had crinkled with laughter just hours earlier while exchanging vows, were now cold, hard stones. "How dare you!" His voice was a low, menacing snarl that cut through the stunned silence. "How dare you embarrass me like this?" The embarrassment was a photograph, a grainy, simple image displayed on the enormous screen behind the wedding stage, which moments before had projected a romantic montage of their courtship. It showed Clara, years younger, standing next to another man on a dimly lit Brooklyn street. They weren't kissing or even holding hands, but the man's arm was casually draped over her shoulder. It was innocent, a relic from a past she'd almost forgotten. But someone had sent it to Marcus's phone, mid-banquet, with a caption dripping poison. "Still thinking about your old flame, even on your wedding day, Marcus. Come on, that's nothing," Clara whispered, her voice trembling as she cradled her sore cheek. "That was from college, years ago. His name is Leo. We were just friends." "Friends?" Marcus sneered, his laugh high and cruel. The entirety of the Thorne family, a dynasty that controlled half the luxury condo market in Manhattan, watched from the presidential table. His mother, Eleanor, watched with a tight-lipped expression of disapproval, not for her son's violence, but for the interruption of her perfectly orchestrated event. His father, Vincent Thorne, a man whose name struck fear in business rivals, simply adjusted his tie, his face an indecipherable mask of indifference. "You're a liar and a cheat," Marcus spat, raising his voice. "You thought you could marry into the Thorne family with secrets? You thought we wouldn't find out about your sordid past?" Tears streamed down Clara's face, mixing with the stinging pain. She looked out at the sea of faces. Business magnates, socialites, government officials, all whispering, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. This was her dream wedding, the culmination of a whirlwind romance that had felt like a Cinderella story. Marcus had been charming. He had swept her off her feet. He had promised her the world. Now he was the one tearing it apart. Her own family was a quiet, small island in this ocean of wealth and power. Her mother gripped her father's arm, her face white with shock. And her father, her sweet, simple father, Mr. Patrick Owens, was a retired high school history teacher, a man who had spent his life in a modest apartment in Queens, a man who always smelled faintly of old books and mild pipe tobacco. He had looked so out of place in his rented tuxedo, his calloused hands nervously clasped in his lap. Now he was slowly, deliberately rising to his feet. Mr. Owens pushed his chair back. The scrape of its legs against the marble floor was unnaturally loud in the silent room. He was not a big man, but as he rose, he seemed to cast a shadow that extended far beyond his physical form. He looked at his daughter, his eyes full of pain that mirrored hers. Then he fixed his gaze on Marcus, and for the first time that day, his expression was not one of nervous deference. It was something else entirely, something cold, ancient, and dangerous. "You will not speak to my daughter that way," Mr. Owens said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that silenced the whispers. It was firm, devoid of the tremor of an old man. Marcus turned, a sneer twisting his lips. "And who are you to tell me what to do? A penniless old teacher? You should be on your knees thanking us for taking this used luggage off your hands." He punctuated the insult by shoving Clara. Not hard, but enough to make her stumble backward, her beautiful custom-made gown, worth more than all her father's life savings, snagging on a chair. Can you imagine the rage? How do you think an average father would react to this public outrage? Comment below before the shock continues. The ghost of Barcelona is revealed. It was then the world tilted on its axis. Mr. Owens did not rush. He did not yell. He simply walked with a calm, measured pace toward the stage. He strode past his sobbing daughter, his eyes fixed on the sneering groom. When he reached center stage, standing right in front of the powerful Thorn heir, he did something no one could have predicted. He reached up to the side of his face, his fingers finding a nearly invisible seam just beneath his ear, and with a faint tearing sound, he began to peel away the skin. The wrinkles, the age spots of the humble teacher, Mr. Owens, began to lift off. Beneath was not flesh, but a smooth, synthetic surface. The mask came off, revealing a face that was decades younger, harder, and terrifyingly familiar to a select few in the room. Vincent Thorn, Marcus's father, who had remained impassive throughout the entire ordeal, shot to his feet. His face drained of all color. His wine glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "It can't be," he whispered, a sound of pure terror. Damien Cross. The name hung in the air like the prelude to a storm. Damien Cross, a ghost, a legend in the underworld, the phantom architect of the fall of a dozen corporate empires 20 years ago in Chicago. A man rumored to be dead or living on a private island under a dozen aliases. He was Clara's father, and he had just watched a spoiled brat slap his only daughter. Damien Cross, no longer the stooped Mr. Owens, let the hyper-realistic mask drop onto the stage. He stretched his neck, the muscles taut and defined. The eyes that stared at Marcus were not the soft, watery eyes of a teacher. They were the piercing, analytical eyes of a predator. "Let's try this again," Damien Cross said, his voice now a silken, deadly whisper. "Were you saying something about used luggage?" The silence that followed the unmasking was a physical entity, heavy and suffocating. The air in the Waldorf Astoria ballroom, once thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, now crackled with an ozone of pure fear. The name Damien Cross was a master key, unlocking forgotten closets in the minds of the city's most powerful men. They remembered the whispered stories, the sudden bankruptcies, the rivals who had simply vanished. And now the ghost stood on a wedding stage, his eyes locked on the Thorn heir. Marcus was frozen, his bravado evaporating like mist in a furnace. The face before him was one he recognized from his father's most secret files, a black and white photo marked with a red X. This was the man his father had spent 2 decades hunting, the architect of a hostile takeover that had nearly cost them everything in the early 2000s. "You're supposed to be dead," Marcus stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Damien Cross allowed a small, chilling smile to touch his lips. "Reports of my demise were, as you can see, greatly exaggerated. I preferred a quiet life. I was content to be a simple history professor. But you—" He took a step forward, and Marcus flinched. "You put your hands on my daughter. You disturbed my peace." Vincent Thorne, Marcus's father, finally found his voice. It was strained, cracking under a pressure no business deal had ever exerted. "Cross, let's be reasonable. This is a misunderstanding, a family dispute." Damien's gaze shifted to him. It was a look that stripped Vincent of his billion-dollar empire, his custom-tailored suit, his carefully constructed persona of power, leaving him naked and afraid. "Reasonable?" Damien repeated. "Was it reasonable, Vincent, when you hired thugs to torch my first office building with my wife still inside? Was it reasonable when you used that insurance money to lay the first brick of this pathetic empire?" A collective gasp went through the room. This wasn't just a business rivalry. This was a vendetta, a blood feud. Clara stared at her father, her mind reeling. The quiet, gentle man who read her bedtime stories, the man who grieved for her mother, a woman she'd been told died from a sudden illness, was this formidable stranger. Her whole life, her entire identity, felt like a carefully constructed lie. "That's a lie," Vincent sputtered, but his sweaty forehead and shifty eyes betrayed him. "You have no proof." "Proof?" Damien laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He reached into the inner pocket of his rented tuxedo and pulled out not a weapon, but a small, sleek USB flash drive. He held it up for all to see. "I spent 20 years being a ghost, Vincent. Ghosts have time. They watch, they listen, and they collect. On this drive is every illegal transaction, every bribed official, every shell company you've ever used. It contains the original police report of the arson you paid to have buried, along with a sworn statement from the man you paid to light the match." He was surprisingly chatty before he passed away in a boating accident last year. He turned his attention back to Marcus, whose face was now the color of ash. "As for you, you spoiled little prince, the photo you received. Who do you think sent it?" The twist was so bold, it took a moment to register. "I did," Damien stated calmly. "I sent the photo. I knew your temper. I knew your arrogance. I knew you were a weak, insecure boy who would react with violence rather than confidence. I needed to see if you were worthy of my daughter's love. You failed the test spectacularly." He had orchestrated the entire public humiliation, not of his daughter, but of the Thorne family. He had set a trap, and they had fallen squarely into it, exposing their true, rotten nature for the world to see. Eleanor Thorne, who had been a statue of horrified silence, finally broke. "Monster! You planned this! You used your own daughter!" "I used my daughter's capacity for forgiveness," Damien corrected, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "She saw goodness in your son where there was none. I, on the other hand, see things as they are. And what I see is a family of criminals who built their fortune on the ashes of my wife." He tossed the USB drive to a man in the front row, Director Maxwell Salas of the FBI's Complex Financial Crimes Division. "I believe you've been looking for this, Director. A little wedding gift from me." The official, a man known for his bulldog tenacity, caught the drive, his eyes wide. He looked from the drive to Vincent Thorne, and a slow, grim smile spread across his face. The foundation of the Thorne Empire had just cracked. Damien then turned back to Clara. The hardness in his face instantly softened, replaced by the familiar love and pain of the father she knew. "My dearest Clara," his voice was choked with emotion. "I am so sorry for the life of lies I made you live. I did it to protect you, to keep you safe from them." He gently touched her bruised cheek, his fingers tracing the red mark left by Marcus's hand. "But now I see the only way to protect you is to dismantle the world that hurts you." He turned and faced the Thorne family one last time. "This isn't over," he promised, his voice a quiet vow of destruction. "This is only the beginning. By the time I'm done, the Thorne name will be nothing but a whispered fable in the dark." Without another word, he took Clara's hand, and together they walked off the stage, leaving behind a shattered wedding, a terrified groom, and the smoldering ruins of a corporate dynasty. The guests, frozen in their seats, could only watch as the legend of Damien Cross was reborn in fire and vengeance. Mid-story action break. The shock in that room must have been electric. If the tension has you hooked, make sure to like and comment with a "if you believe revenge is a dish best served cold." The command center and the final turn. The drive from the Waldorf Astoria was a blur for Clara. The bright city lights blurred in the windows of a discreet black sedan that had appeared out of nowhere the moment they exited the hotel. Her father, Damien Cross, sat beside her. No longer the frail Mr. Owens, but a man who radiated a quiet, coiled energy. The rented tuxedo had been replaced with a simple dark gray Henley shirt and black pants that seemed more suited to his true persona. Clara's mind was a vortex of emotions. The pain in her cheek was a dull throb, a physical anchor to the surreal nightmare. Betrayal mixed with a strange, soaring sense of awe. The man who bandaged her scraped knees and helped her with history homework was capable of taking down industrial titans. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. The wedding dress felt like a costume from another life, heavy and ridiculous. "Somewhere safe," he replied, his eyes on the road. "A place I prepared a long time ago." The safe house was an unmarked warehouse in the city's industrial sector, but behind a corrugated steel door that hissed open with a silent hydraulic sigh was a different world. It was a minimalist, high-tech command center. A bank of monitors lined one wall, displaying a dizzying array of financial data, news feeds, and security camera footage from across the city. A long conference table dominated the center of the room, and in the corner was a small, functional living space. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair, pulled back into a severe bun, rose from a chair. It was Maria, the woman Clara had known all her life as Aunt Maria, the kind neighbor who always brought over pastries and looked after her father. "The package has been delivered, Damien," Maria said, her voice clear and professional. "Salas has already convened an emergency task force. Thorne Group assets are being frozen as we speak." "Aunt Maria?" Clara breathed, completely bewildered. Maria offered her a soft, apologetic smile. "My real name is General Maria Estrada, former military intelligence. I retired the same time your father died." The ground beneath Clara's feet crumbled a little further. Her entire neighborhood, her entire life. It was a stage. Damien Cross led her to the monitors. "Watch," he said, pointing to a newsfeed. The headline was explosive. "Thorne Group CEO and heir arrested in wide-ranging corruption probe. Assets frozen." A live video showed a frantic Vincent Thorne being escorted out of his mansion by FBI agents. Marcus was beside him, his face a mask of gaping disbelief, his wedding tuxedo now wrinkled and stained. Eleanor was screaming at the cameras, a stark contrast to her earlier glacial composure. "You did this," Clara whispered. "In 1 hour you destroyed them. They destroyed themselves 20 years ago when they chose greed over humanity, Damien corrected gently. I am simply collecting the debt. He pointed to another screen showing a complex web of financial transactions. This is what I've been doing for 2 decades, my love. Not just teaching history, but mapping every dirty secret of the man who killed your mother. I built a financial weapon, a virus designed to dismantle their empire from the inside out, piece by piece. The USB drive was just the key to activate it. He explained the plan, his voice calm and methodical. The virus wasn't just data. It was a series of automated, timed stock dumps triggered by specific keywords in the news. The moment the media reported the investigation, the shell companies he controlled across the globe began to sell off Thorn Group stock, triggering a panic sell. Simultaneously, anonymous tips were sent to international regulators about the group's offshore accounts, freezing their international capital. It was a multifaceted assault, a corporate blitzkrieg he had spent half a lifetime engineering. But why, Dad? Clara asked, tears finally coming again, this time not from humiliation, but from deep confusion and hurt. Why the lies? Why couldn't you have just been my father? His face softened, the hardened strategist replaced by the loving parent. He pulled her into a hug, his embrace strong and secure. Because they would have found us. His voice choked with 2 decades of pain. Vincent was obsessed. He knew I survived the fire. He had people searching for me, searching for any surviving family. If he had ever discovered I had a daughter, Clara, there is no line he wouldn't have crossed to get to me through you. So I died. Mr. Owens was born, a boring, harmless man no one would look at twice. It was the only way to give you a normal life, a safe life. A ping from one of the computers drew Maria's attention. Damien, you need to see this. On one of the security feeds labeled Thorn Secondary Residence, they saw a flurry of activity. A black van had pulled up to a luxurious villa in the Hamptons. Men in dark suits were rushing inside. That's not Salas's team, Maria noted, frowning. Those aren't government plates. Damien Cross zoomed in on the face of one of the men. A cold recognition dawned on his face. Silas the Viper, he muttered. An old acquaintance. Works for the highest bidder. Specializes in extractions and disappearances. Who would hire him? Clara asked. Her heart pounding. Someone with more to lose than just money, Damien answered, his mind racing. The Thorn Group didn't operate in a vacuum. They were the public face of a much more dangerous, shadowy consortium of investors. Vincent was their money launderer. With him gone, the consortium is exposed. They are not trying to save Vincent. They are trying to clean up loose ends. Another screen lit up with an incoming video call. The caller ID was blocked. Maria patched it to the main display. The face that appeared was haggard, his eyes full of desperate, wild cunning. He was in the back of a moving vehicle, city lights blurred behind him. It was Marcus. You, he growled, his voice a venomous hiss. You think you've won? You've just signed your own death warrant, and hers. Let me guess, Damien said, his voice deceptively calm. Your father's silent partners aren't happy. They want the original data. They want the real ledgers from which your virus was built, Marcus spat. They know a copy on a USB isn't your style. You have the source code. They'll trade it for my father. But if you refuse, they know about him. He gestured vaguely, and the camera shifted to show a bound and gagged figure in the seat next to him. It was Leo, the man from the photograph. Clara gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. He was easy to find, Marcus sneered. Just a little digging into your daughter's innocent past. We have his family too. You have 1 hour to deliver the source data at the Crimson Bridge, the old rail bridge over the Harlem River. If you're late, or if we see one cop, he dies first. Then his family. Then we'll spend every resource we have hunting your little girl. You can't hide forever. My father's partners have a very long reach." The screen went black. Clara turned to her father, her eyes wide with terror. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Damien stared at the screen where Marcus's sneering face had been. The mask of the cold strategist was back in place, but his eyes held a fire hotter than any boardroom battle. This was no longer about money or revenge. It was about his daughter's life and innocent people caught in the crossfire. "Maria," he said, his voice like ice. "Prep the package, but not the real one. Load the secondary virus onto a hard drive. The one we designed for a scorched earth scenario." He turned to Clara, his expression grim. "He's right about one thing. We can't hide forever. So we stop hiding." He walked over to a steel locker and opened it. Inside, nestled in custom-made foam, was not a laptop, but a sleek, matte black handgun and several clips of ammunition. "Tonight," Damien Cross said as he expertly checked the weapon, "we end this for good. Black Pawn." The final chess match at the Crimson Bridge. The Crimson Bridge arched over the dark, slow-moving waters of the Harlem River, its steel skeleton lit by the orange glow of the city. It was a place of transit, of movement, but tonight it felt like a final destination. The air was thick with moisture and the low rumble of impending violence. Damien Cross stood at the bridge's midpoint, a solitary figure silhouetted against the distant skyline. He held a steel briefcase in one hand. He looked like a businessman waiting for a late-night deal, but the cold, focused calm in his posture spoke of a different kind of commerce. Clara and Maria were 2 miles away at the command center. A live feed from a drone silently hovering high above the bridge played on their main screen. Clara's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" she had pleaded before he left. "There has to be another way. In their world, this is the only language they understand," he had replied, giving her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. "Trust me." A black van, the same one from the villa, screeched to a halt at the opposite end of the bridge. 2 burly figures emerged, their suits doing little to conceal their muscular frames. Then Marcus stepped out, dragging a terrified Leo with him, a pistol held firmly to his temple. "Cross!" Marcus's voice was sharp, cutting through the night air. "You came alone. Smart. Now toss the briefcase. Show me he's unharmed first." "You're not in a position to make demands," Marcus yelled, his laughter high-pitched and unhinged. He shoved the gun harder against Leo's head, making the young man whimper in fear. "The briefcase, now!" With a deliberate motion, Damien set the briefcase on the ground and slid it across the asphalt. It coasted smoothly, stopping a few feet from the van. One of Marcus's thugs approached cautiously, keeping his eyes on Damien, while the other kept his weapon trained on the silent darkness surrounding the bridge. "Open it," Marcus ordered. The thug knelt, undid the latches, and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in foam, was a portable hard drive. He gave Marcus a nod. "The source code." Marcus sneered at Damien. "See, in the end, even legends have a price, and your price is your daughter's life." "A price I'm willing to pay," Damien said, lowering his voice. "But not to you." It was a cue. From the command center, Maria's fingers flew across a keyboard. "Phase 2. Ready." The hard drive in the briefcase began to emit a high-pitched whine. A small LED flickered from green to red. The thug's eyes widened in panic. "Boss, it's a—" He never finished the sentence. The hard drive wasn't a bomb in the conventional sense. It was an EMP, a powerful, miniaturized electromagnetic pulse device. A flash of blue-white light burst from the briefcase, and every electronic device within a 50-foot radius instantly died. The van's engine coughed and stalled. The bridge lights flickered and went out. The drone feed dissolved into static. Marcus's phone, which he was using to communicate with his backers, went dead. They were plunged into an unsettling, isolated darkness, lit only by the distant city glow. In the command center, Clara cried out, "The signal is gone! What's happening?" "It's the plan," Maria said, her voice tight, her eyes fixed on the blank screens. "He's cut them off. He's on his own now." On the bridge, the sudden darkness and silence were disorienting. For a fraction of a second, everyone froze. It was the moment Damien Cross had been waiting for. He moved with a speed that defied his apparent age, a blur of motion in the gloom. He wasn't aiming for Marcus. He was aiming for his men. Before the first thug could even process the EMP blast, Damien had closed the distance. There was a sickening crunch of bone as he landed a precise, incapacitating strike to the man's knee, followed by a swift blow to the temple that sent him collapsing to the pavement, unconscious. The second thug, regaining his senses, swiveled his weapon towards the sound, but Damien was already moving, using the van as cover. He kicked the vehicle's door with tremendous force, slamming it against the man and pinning him against the van's frame. A second kick disarmed him. It was over in under 5 seconds. 2 professional enforcers neutralized with brutal efficiency. Marcus, in a panic, fired his pistol wildly into the darkness. Bullets whizzed, ricocheting off the bridge's steel beams with loud pings. Leo, in a moment of pure survival instinct, dropped to the ground, crawling away from the madly firing Marcus. "You can't hide, old man!" Marcus shrieked, his voice cracking with fear and rage. A calm voice emerged from the darkness directly behind him. "I'm not hiding." Marcus spun around, eyes wide with terror. Damien Cross was there, untouched. The matte black handgun from the locker now in his hand, held with the relaxed confidence of a seasoned professional. He hadn't fired a single shot. "It's over, Marcus," Damien said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's not over!" Marcus screamed, raising his pistol to shoot, but his hands trembled uncontrollably. His shot went wide, shattering the night silence. Damien didn't flinch. He didn't return fire. Instead, he made a small, almost imperceptible gesture with his free hand. From the shadows beneath the bridge, a spotlight snapped on, pinning Marcus in its brilliant white shaft of light. Simultaneously, the low rumble of a powerful engine filled the air as a police speedboat sped into view on the river, its blue and red lights flashing. Standing on its bow was Director Salas of the FBI, a megaphone in hand. "Marcus Thorne!" Salas's voice boomed over the water. "You are surrounded. Drop your weapon now." Marcus looked wildly from the boat to Damien, his face a mess of confusion and desperation. You called the cops! I told you not to!" "I didn't call them," Damien said simply. "I own the company that manufactures their new encrypted communication systems. They've been listening to every word you've said since you made your call. They were just waiting for you to make your move." It was the final checkmate. Every move Marcus had made, every threat, every demand, had been anticipated and countered. He was not a player in this game. He was a pawn moved to a corner by a grandmaster. With a final desperate cry of rage, Marcus spun his weapon not towards Damien, but himself. Before anyone could react, he jammed the pistol to his head. "Stop!" Clara's voice suddenly screamed. Everyone froze. She was running onto the bridge, her wedding dress gathered in her hands, her face streaked with tears. Maria was right behind her, trying to pull her back. "Don't do it, Marcus," she pleaded. "It's not worth it." Marcus looked at her, his eyes vacant, the gun still pressed to his temple. He saw the woman he was supposed to love, the woman he had brutalized, now begging for his life. For a moment, a flicker of something. Shame, regret, a tiny piece of the man he could have been, crossed his face. "He's stalling," Maria hissed to Damien. "It's a classic tactic. He's waiting for his real backup. Damien's eyes narrowed. Maria was right. The consortium wouldn't rely on a loose cannon like Marcus. This was a distraction. His gaze swept the dark, opposite end of the bridge. He saw it then. A faint, glittering reflection. The unmistakable signature of a sniper scope. They weren't here for Marcus. They were here for him. And his daughter was directly in the line of fire. "Clara, get down!" he roared, lunging toward her. The crack of the sniper rifle echoed across the bridge, a sound far sharper and deadlier than Marcus's pistol. The world slowed to a stop as Damien Cross dove, shoving Clara onto the hard bridge asphalt. He felt a white-hot agony tear through his shoulder. The force of the impact spun him, and he landed heavily on his side, his vision momentarily swimming in a red haze. The sniper's shot had found its mark. "Dad!" Clara screamed, scrambling towards him, her voice filled with terror. On the river, Director Salas's voice boomed over the megaphone. "Sniper! North end of the bridge! All units advance!" The police speedboat surged forward, its spotlight sweeping the darkness. Marcus, shocked by the sudden turn of events, hesitated for a fatal second. The sniper wasn't his backup, it was his executioner. They were cleaning up all loose ends. Realizing he was just another liability to be erased, he dropped his own weapon and raised his hands in surrender as police officers swarmed the bridge. Ignoring the chaos, Maria rushed to Damien's side, her military days medical training kicking into gear. She quickly assessed, applying pressure to the wound. "You missed the artery, but you're losing blood. We need to get you out of here." "Not yet." Damien grit his teeth against the pain, a sickening wave. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his eyes fixed on the opposite end of the bridge where the shot had originated. They won't send just one. They'll have a team. They need the source data. They're coming for it. As if on cue, the roar of high-performance engines filled the night. Two black sedans, faster and more menacing than the van, sped onto the bridge from the north, their tires squealing as they weaved through the abandoned cars. Men in tactical gear, armed with assault rifles, leaned out of the windows, firing to force the police to take cover. These were no ordinary thugs, they were highly trained mercenaries. "They're going for the command center," Maria realized with a gasp of horror. "The drone signal is down, but they know it originated nearby." "Clara," Damien said, his voice strained but clear, gripping his daughter's arm. "Listen to me. They don't know what you look like. They only know me. You need to blend in with the civilians being evacuated by the police. Get off this bridge. Go." "No, I won't leave you," she cried, her tears falling onto his blood-soaked shirt. "You must," he insisted, his gaze intense. "This is bigger than the Thorne family. It's about the people behind them. If they get their hands on that data, they will destabilize the entire country's economy for their own benefit. The command center has a self-destruct sequence. Maria knows the code, but you have to be safe. I won't lose you too." His words, a final plea from a father to his daughter, finally broke through her panic. With a sob, she nodded. Maria helped her up. "Go now. We'll create a distraction." As Clara ran off, blending in with a group of shocked motorists being led to safety, Maria turned back to Damien. "What's the distraction, Damien?" He looked at the approaching sedans, a grim, defiant smile on his lips. "The ghost makes one final appearance." He struggled to stand, using a concrete barrier for support, his left arm dangling uselessly at his side. With his right hand, he raised his handgun. He was outmanned and outgunned, a wounded man against an assassination squad. But he was Damien Cross, and he stood on his chosen battlefield. He fired 2 precise shots, not at the men, but at the front tires of the lead car. The rubber exploded, and the sedan swerved violently, smashing into the side of the bridge with a screech of tortured metal. The second car was forced to brake hard to avoid a collision. The mercenaries piled out, using their vehicles as cover, their weapons aimed at him. From the lead car, a figure emerged. He wasn't dressed in tactical gear, but an impeccably tailored Italian suit that looked absurdly out of place. He was an older man with silver hair and the cold, dead eyes of a shark. "Damien Cross," the man said, his voice quiet and cultured, easily audible in the tense silence. "It's been a long time. I am Mr. Sokolov, a representative of the consortium. You have caused us a great deal of inconvenience." "Sokolov," Damien recognized, his mind racing. He recognized the name, a phantom figure in international finance, a man who moved billions for rogue states and crime syndicates. He was the architect of the shadows, the true power behind men like Vincent Thorne. "The data cross," Sokolov said, as if discussing the weather. "Give it to us, and we will let you die quickly. A courtesy for old time's sake. Resist, and we will find your daughter. We are very, very good at finding people. We will take our time with her, and we will make you watch." It was the ultimate threat. But Sokolov had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was dealing with a cornered man. In reality, he was dealing with a man who had just watched his daughter escape to safety, a man with nothing left to lose. "You want the data?" Damien yelled, a strange, triumphant light in his eyes. "You should have checked your bank accounts first." Sokolov frowned. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He pulled out a satellite phone, unaffected by the localized EMP, and made a quick call. As he listened, his composure finally shattered. His face went from pale to livid. "What have you done?" he roared into the phone, then to Damien. From her new vantage point at the command center, Maria saw it happen on the financial feeds. The scorched earth virus she had loaded onto the decoy hard drive hadn't been an EMP. That was a separate device. The hard drive itself contained a far more insidious weapon. When the thug opened the briefcase, it didn't just trigger the EMP. It also sent a wireless pulse to a hidden receiver in the van that was connected to the internet via a satellite link. That pulse authenticated the virus, which then unleashed itself across the entire consortium's financial network. It wasn't designed to steal or expose. It was designed to corrupt. It was a data-shredding algorithm of pure chaos, turning trillions of dollars of assets into meaningless digital noise. It was tearing through their offshore servers, wiping accounts, falsifying records, and bringing their entire shadow economy to a grinding halt. "I just collected another debt," Damien shouted, his voice ringing with victory. "The one you owed the world!" Sokolov, in a fit of blind rage, raised his own weapon. "Kill him! Kill him now!" The mercenaries opened fire. A hail of bullets chewed at the concrete barrier where Damien was. But he was already ready gun. In the split second of Sokolov's distraction, he had dropped behind the barrier, rolling to the edge of the bridge. He scrambled over the railing, fired one last shot from his pistol. Not at Sokolov, but at a thick power cable running along the side of the bridge, causing a shower of sparks. And then, without hesitation, he leapt over the side and plunged into the dark water below. Sokolov and his men ran to the edge, firing into the river, but it was useless. Damien Cross had vanished once more, swallowed by the night. The architect of the shadows had been outmaneuvered. His empire of smoke and mirrors was collapsing around him, all because of a ghost he thought he could control. A new dawn, the Mediterranean respite. The dive into the Harlem River was a brutal, icy shock that stole Damien's breath. For a moment, the world was a roaring black chaos. The agony in his shoulder flared, a supernova of pain that threatened to drag him into unconsciousness. Bullets smacked the water around him, their deadly tracks marked by brief, phosphorescent zippers in the gloom. He fought the instinct to panic. His decades of discipline took over. He forced himself to float, letting the strong current become his ally, dragging him swiftly away from the bridge and the circle of death blooming on the surface. Above, Sokolov stared at the dark, turbulent waters, his face a mask of incandescent fury. The plan was in tatters. His 2-decade-long hunt culminated in this final, infuriating act of defiance. The ghost had not only escaped, but he had taken their entire financial world with him. "Find him!" he snarled at his men. "I want his body! I want his head!" But he knew it was useless. The river was deep, the current treacherous. Cross had planned this. Every step was a calculation, and this was his final, brilliant checkmate move. The architect of the shadows was left powerless, his empire of secrets and blood money dissolving into digital dust. Downriver, Damien fought for every inch. His vision tunneled. The city lights above blurred into a meaningless smear. His wounded body screamed surrender for the sweet final piece of the abyss. But one image burned in his mind. Clara's face, terrified but alive, disappearing into the crowd. That image was his fuel. He swam, his movements growing slower, until his searching hand finally brushed against the rough, viscous texture of a wooden piling. The old ferry terminal, his extraction point. With the last drops of his legendary will, he hauled his broken body out of the water, collapsing exhausted onto the rotting pier. His breathing, a harsh, desperate gasp. A moment later, a silent black Zodiac boat, its engine barely a whisper, pulled up to the pier. Maria was at the helm, her face grim but steady. "I was beginning to worry," she said, her voice tinged with a respect that transcended their long association. With expert proficiency, she helped him aboard, her hands already working to apply a pressure bandage to his wound. "You are a stubborn, foolish old man, Damien." "It's genetic," he gasped. A faint smile touched his lips before he finally allowed the exhaustion to claim him. 2 days later, the world felt a long way off. In a quiet, sun-drenched villa overlooking the turquoise Mediterranean Sea and the port of Serenity, another of Damien's meticulously planned contingencies on the Spanish coast, Clara finished changing the bandage on her father's shoulder. The bullet had been removed by a discreet doctor, a man whose loyalty Damien had secured years ago. It was healing, the physical wound closing far faster than the invisible ones they both carried. He sat on the terrace, gazing out at the endless expanse of water, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked truly at peace. The watchful, tormented quality in his eyes was gone. "How do you feel?" she asked softly, sitting beside him, like a man who has finally finished his life's work. His voice was quiet. He reached out for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "Now I can begin the life I always wanted, just being your father. No more secrets, Clara. No more lies." She squeezed his hand, a genuine, joyful smile illuminating her face. "I would like that very much." She followed his gaze to the horizon, her mind so much like his, already moving, strategizing. "You know," she began thoughtfully, "the news is calling it Digital Zero event. You didn't just ruin the Thorns. You destroyed a multi-trillion-dollar shadow economy. You crippled crime syndicates, destabilized corrupt regimes. You gave the world a chance." He nodded slightly. "They had it coming. The government will eventually release the legitimate Thorn Group assets," she continued, a sly, familiar glint in her eyes. "And with your own extensive resources, one person could build something powerful from the ashes, a foundation dedicated to helping the victims of men like Sokolov and Vincent Thorn, a foundation that could fight their kind of corruption on a global scale. But this time, in the full light of day." Damien Cross turned to look at his daughter, to truly look at her. He saw not the naive girl who had walked into a disastrous fairy tale, but a formidable, intelligent woman, forged in the crucible of his war. She possessed his own strategic brilliance, but it was tempered with her mother's deep, unbreakable compassion. She was his true legacy. The Crosslight Foundation, he mused, the name tasting like hope. A slow, proud smile spread across his face. I like the sound of that. But make no mistake, Clara, it will be your foundation, your vision. I'm officially retired. I'm just the old history professor who's surprisingly good with accounts. They sat together in a deep, comfortable silence, watching the sun dip beneath the ocean, igniting the sky in shades of fiery orange and soft gold. The storm had passed, the ghosts had been exorcised, and for the first time, the future was not a carefully plotted contingency plan or a desperate flight from danger, but a vast, open horizon, shimmering with infinite promise. A new dawn was breaking, not just for a father and his daughter, but for the countless lives they would now touch and change for the better. The dark legend of Damien Cross was finally over. The brilliant legacy of Clara Cross was just beginning. Conclusion and reflection. What you just heard was more than a story of revenge. It was a testament to the unbreakable bond between a father and child, and a reminder that true strength often hides beneath the most unassuming exterior. The world is full of secrets, and sometimes the most dramatic truths are just waiting to be unmasked. Interactive question. What would you do with the power of the Crosslight Foundation? Which corrupt magnate would you unmask first? Leave your answer in the comments. If this story of intrigue, sacrifice, and final justice resonated, please take a moment to share this video with someone who loves a powerful plot twist. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows us to bring more incredible dramas like this to life. Thank you for listening. Would you like me to help you translate and rewrite a second story with an equally cinematic style?